All right, got everybody coming in right now. Want to welcome everyone. Thank you for all our participants and all our panelists for coming in today. Just in case you're not sure, you're at the SoCal CCIM Lunch and Learn webinar that we host once a month. And so I want to thank everyone for being here. I see all the lovely faces with our panelists, and thank you so much for your time. Go ahead and share my screen here so we could go ahead and get started. All right. That's not the screen I wanted to share. Let me share another one. All right, we all see that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. Again, I want to welcome everyone to SoCal CCIM. We're excited to have the opportunity to present this topic to everyone. Topic is surrounded around due diligence, and so we wanted to make sure that we brought information to those in the commercial real estate industry. So whether you are a commercial real estate broker that is just starting out in your career, or you've been doing this for a very long time and you're just trying to look for some additional ways for us to improve your probability of success of closing a transaction. And so that's the topic and our goal for today. Before we actually get started, just wanted to remind everyone the mission statement of CCIM, which is the mission is to elevate our members to the highest levels of success in the commercial real estate profession. And we host workshops like this to make sure we do exactly that. Want to encourage everyone to follow us on the different social media sites as well. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you do have an interest in looking at a recording of this event along with any of past events, you can go ahead and check out our YouTube page, which is SoCal CCIM. And so I want to encourage you to subscribe over there and get all the content that we're providing. Also want to give recognition to all of our board members. There's no way we could do the things that we do with all our board members. And we have our fabulous president, Eric Crickle, that's here on the line as well. Bonnie Brown, Brian Russell, Justin Hugren, myself, Gary Martinez, Willie Hugren, Dino Champagne, Greg Deal, and Tone Ayub. And so again, board members, thank you so much for everything you do. You do a lot of work here for our group, and we're very happy to have you on board. Also want to give recognition to our sponsors. There's no way we could do the things that we do at the cost that we do it without our sponsors. And so I want to make sure we give a shout out to CoStar LoopNet, Allied Commercial Real Estate, 1031 Crowdfunding, Asset Preservation, Asheville Associates, Baker Law Group, and Syntax, and Platinum Well Group. They're all open for business. And so if anyone has any questions, they'll love to hear from you. Take your phone call, and we'd love to support them just like they support our chapter. So again, sponsors, thank you for everything you do. Also want to talk a little bit about membership. If you have an interest in becoming a member of SoCal CCIM, we kind of listed here the benefits that we have, which includes networking, education, marketing, knowledge, chapter involvement, giving you information as far as technology. There's a candidate guidance along with the overall CCIM designee, which has been tremendous for my career. And if I had to do it all over again, the only difference I would do is I would get the pin a little quicker than what I initially did. We got about 120 members that are part of our chapter. We got about 18 events a year, and we have 8 sponsors, plus, and that always continues to grow. And so if anyone has an interest in sponsoring an event, any of our events, we're always welcome to, to talk to you and make sure we highlight your business as well. So with that, okay, we're going to get into our program here. We have some fantastic presenters, some fantastic panelists that we asked to jump on board here with us. We are certainly in a different environment, but the environment is certainly creating a lot of opportunities as well. And so we wanted to make sure we brought in the experts that are part of all due diligence opportunities for our buyers and sellers, and talk to them a little bit more as to what they're seeing in the marketplace, and see if there's little tips and tricks that we could use for our own business to, again, increase probability of success. And so we have Mr. Bob Pace here with Commercial Real Estate Inspectors, Jennifer Davis with TMC Financing, and Lori Chavez with Chavez, Gardner, and Kincannon. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to go ahead and let everyone do a self-introduction. If you do have any questions for any of the panelists, we do have the Q&A box open, the chat box open. We also want to encourage everyone to, if you have a product, service that you want to sell, we always want to encourage people to, find someone's information and connect with them as well, because we always want to encourage people meeting the people to help grow each other's business. And so why don't we start off with Jennifer? Why don't you do a self-introduction and kind of tell us who you are and what you do? Jennifer?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you everyone here at CCIM for having me today. I greatly appreciate it. Jennifer Davis, TMC Financing, SBA 504 expert. I assist clients, yourself, lenders, brokers, acquire commercial real estate utilizing the 504 loan program. I've been with TMC Financing for 8 years now, and TMC Financing is the largest certified development corporation serving the state of California, Nevada, and Arizona. Look forward to sharing with you some of my knowledge this afternoon, or is it afternoon yet? I guess it is afternoon.
You're there.
Thank you again for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Jennifer, thank you so much. I've known you for quite some time and you do a fantastic job. And it's good to see you on here. Lori Chavez, self-introduction.
I was about to say good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Lori Chavez. I'm a shareholder at Chavez, Gardner, and Kincannon. Been practicing a little over 17 years. I do business and real estate transactions, commercial transactions, purchase and sale agreements, leasing, look at title review, commercial loan docs. So basically everything on the transactional side of commercial as well as litigation. Thanks for having me today.
Lori, thank you so much. We certainly have a lot of questions for you. So yeah, thank you for being here. Okay, Mr. Bob Pace, tell us who you are and what you do.
Again, thank you for inviting me. My name's Bob Pace, and I'm the co-owner of Commercial Real Estate Inspectors, and which is kind of self-evident what we do. Done about 10,000 inspections, work all over Southern California, have flown throughout the entire United States doing inspections, particularly expert witness sort of things. But currently we are extremely busy in Southern California with commercial real estate inspections. And I've got a number of questions that I've been asked, and at some point we'll get into them. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you here, Bob. I mean, because we truly believe, especially during the due diligence process of the better job that we do as a commercial real estate broker, for our clients, whether they're looking to buy or sell the property, we are able to increase the probability of success, right? And that's really, again, the goal of what we're looking to achieve today. And we're looking to pick each of your brains and kind of get some nuggets from each of you to kind of do exactly that. So some of the stuff is, I think, going to be pretty common and pretty consistent as to what a lot of people do in their practice. But at the same time, we could always learn a little bit more and make sure what we're doing is the right way as well. So first question, we're going to start off with Mr. Bob Pace. Again, thank you so much for being here. So as far as a property conditions report, when is a property condition report? What does it do, and what are we expecting to receive when we are calling you to get a report? What's the goal of the report?
That's an excellent question. Basically, what I go over with everybody when we start an inspection is what we do. And basically what we do is, sorry, for whatever reason, my computer is not working well, so I'm doing this off my phone. We're looking at all the major systems: electrical, plumbing, heating and air, the structure, moisture, not just the roof, but the grounds, how everything's handling it, along with safety concerns and that sort of thing. What you're going to get with a report is anywhere from roughly minimum 40, as much as maybe 100 pages of details and notes, but probably the summary, which tells you what the expected useful life left in that thing is. Let's say it's the roof, what you should expect to pay over the next 5 years for that system, and any immediate repairs or further investigation that we recommend. So that's going to be our main focus, are those things. And that's what you're going to get report-wise.
So let me ask you this, going along those lines, what does the report does not consist of?
Good question. And a whole seminar could be given on what it doesn't.
Yeah, we know.
But it probably the easiest way to give you an analogy, it'd be like if you're going to the doctor and getting a good, thorough general physical, and he gets to the knee and he says, you've got some issues with the knee, I would like further investigation. That'd be a similar thing. One that just happened the other day, we're doing a large project. They had a lot of electrical demands. And as soon as we saw the electrical, I could tell it wasn't big enough. Well, at that point, because they wanted to do manufacturing, you're going to have to bring in an electrical specialist, whether it's an engineer or contractor, and what's it going to take to upgrade and that sort of thing. So it's really a general inspection, and we're going to let you know basically what is with that system and those major systems. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. And so what I gathered from that is basically we're going to get a general overview of the property of what's existing and what's there. But it's not necessarily going to take a deep dive into the electrical or maybe even the air conditioning, and just kind of a high overview of kind of what's there, and maybe just kind of point out some things and give us some recommendations that maybe we should bring in other tradesmen to better get an analysis of whatever the system is. Is that
precisely?
Yeah.
Well said.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. And Jennifer, okay, so we're talking about due diligence, right? And it's so important as to how are we going to pay, for these properties that we're going to purchase. And so, thinking of a buyer, thinking of a broker that's representing the buyer, what are some things that a broker and the buyer should be preparing themselves to make sure that they are going to be able to successfully, close a transaction or increase the probability of closing the transactions? What should buyers and brokers be preparing even before they give you a call? Any suggestions?
Absolutely. So, typically we're gonna look at historical financials. So majority of the lenders in the marketplace are cash flow lenders. So they're going to want to be thinking about from a tax perspective, maybe don't make it your most aggressive year if you know that you have this on your mind, right, as you're coming into a tax year. That's kind of people wrapping up their taxes right now, for example, for 2020. We'll typically want to look at 3 years historical business tax returns, personal tax returns. The other piece is just making sure that we're all kind of on the same page with regards to down payment. What's the down payment expectation? What's the access to that down payment? Often lenders are going to be looking to verify that. As a matter of fact, I talked to a client this morning, and she's excited to pursue the opportunity, but when we really started talking about the down payment and the access to that, that's not as much of a reality for her today. So just again, making sure that we understand what their financial situation looks like, gathering that information, working with their CPA, having access to tax returns, both personal, business, personal financial statements. And then if we're coming into a tax year, maybe holding off on some filing and some aggressive tax strategy just to make sure that we're going to be well positioned with our lending partner.
And maybe, if you don't mind, maybe for those of us that are not really sure, SBA financing versus conventional financing. So if a buyer is looking to purchase a property, when is it a good time to look at SBA versus conventional?
SBA has the advantage of the low down payment. So if you have a client that's looking to acquire a property, going to occupy 51%, typically the down payment requirement is only 10%. There'll be some scenarios where, say, it's a startup or special purpose where we may require 15 or 20%. Lending candidly right now, I'm seeing conventional loans, banks are looking for about a 65% loan to value. So you're looking at probably a 35% down payment. The most aggressive lender out there might do a 25% down conventional.
Right.
The key is the down payment, and then a long-term fixed rate as well. SBA typically will offer a 25-year fully amortizing rate, currently priced at 2.75. So the SBA rate is lower, right, than conventional interest rates, and even that conventional SBA first trust deed.
That's fantastic. I mean, 2.75. I'm not sure if we ever seen it that low. Maybe we have. Have we, Jennifer?
Believe it or not, yes, it's even been a little lower than that. It's
a little lower.
We were at about 2.54 a few months ago.
Oh, 2.54.
So, but again, sub 3 year, 3% money and a 25-year amortization,
Wow.
Effective interest rate. It's an amazing time to buy a building.
An amazing time. And I think there's some other opportunities with some debt relief, right, that you can tell us a little bit later as well. And so, yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so let's go to Lori Chavez. Okay, so topic is right now is, okay, so buyers looking to acquire a commercial real estate property. They're talking to their broker, or they see something on the internet and say, hey, I want that property, I like it. What are some things that a buyer or a broker should be doing as they're thinking about, preparing an offer, legality wise, to make sure that they are not putting themselves in jeopardy. And also the broker is not putting themselves in jeopardy. Any suggestions or ideas, again, to increase probability of success as they're doing their opening of due diligence?
Yeah, sure. So basically, when you're talking about due diligence, the aim is that you want to thoroughly inspect the property, look at the financing, the profitability, other compliance obligations that they're going to have to deal with once they own the property. And you just want to try to reduce and mitigate your any financial uncertainties that could arise in the future. So, the buyer is going to want to ensure that it's a good financial investment. It's, protected from unknown cost. Look at information that's not apparent or readily available. And these can be things like zoning restrictions, liens, looking at the structure, repair costs. So I think, one good way to do it, and it depends on the size of the property and, the cost and what you're dealing with, is sometimes it's really good for a broker to investigate a little bit early before even going into contract. Obviously you always want to do a walkthrough, but, if you're talking about a property that you're going to put substantial money into it can be useful to do some kind of investigation. Because if you discover right away that there's some, adverse findings, maybe you can negotiate a little bit better, get a lower price, make sure it's right from you right from the start. So you and the broker are not spending excess funds on doing kind of survey or, looking into invasive testing right away. If you can rule it off the list immediately, you want to make sure the property is right for you, looking at permits and zoning restrictions, the timing of city approvals. And just looking to see if you want to spend time to do due diligence. So I think that's the first thing, is decide if you want to do a little due diligence first. I think the second thing is to also, if you're for a broker, is decide, what is my buyer? What kind of buyer do I have? Is this an investment buyer? Like, are they looking to, make money and rent? So you obviously want to go and do your proper due diligence on rents and rent rolls, financial statements. If you're looking at a developer, again, then you're looking at, am I going to go look at the zoning, title issues? If I'm dealing with an owner occupied property and the person wants to come in, make sure it's, good for their space. Do they have tenants they need to get out of the property? So I think the first part is doing all the preliminary due diligence, figuring out the goals of your buyer. And then after that, once you're kind of into the property, I think, the brokers pretty much, at least seasoned brokers, are pretty well knowledgeable about entering into their own contracts, and they might use form contracts. But I think, then if issues come up where, there's title issues or certain legal documents that need to be reviewed, then they can come to a lawyer. Or, you enter into a contract where another lawyer has added to maybe the form documents. You might want to get, some other input by a lawyer to make sure that it's, you're not missing something or not seeing some kind of potential liability.
So you said a couple of things in the beginning, and I think this is very common that a broker either gets, or if they haven't got this question, there's going to be some point in time they're going to get popped with this question, and my client, from their client, the question is, can you check zoning to make sure I could perform my business on the property? Right. So how much due diligence should a broker be doing in investigating zoning, for a client? So how much should they do and not do? Any suggestions?
I think, again, it goes back to the property you're looking at and the size of the property and what the type of buyer is. So if it's really a buyer that wants to develop the property, then it's very important. And then you want to know, is it zoned for the particular purpose? If it's a small property and it's not really an issue and you're just kind of looking at a use issue, I don't think, you have to do too much extensive investigation. And also, if timing's an issue, it's not like you have to go and investigate everything. So if there's timing's an issue, we're talking about a small property, it doesn't seem like, zoning's a big issue. You could always enter into the agreement as well. But put in the agreement that, that you have certain times to do those kind of investigations for zoning, and maybe get other experts on, and give yourself enough time in the contingency periods to make that happen.
So what are some common pitfalls for you, Lori, that you see that that you see brokers just maybe not doing or half-assing a little bit that you probably be spending a little bit more time on because it's going to save them any grief or again increase probability of a successful transaction. Anything
I think
comment?
on the buyer side, lots of times, you're relying on forms. So, and if you're using like the ARR forms, there are a lot of representations and warranties that, that the seller is required to make, sometimes more than other forms or other custom forms. But in the same sense, I think the broker has to remember that a lot of these disclosures are what's known by the seller or their agents. And so if anything's not readily apparent, that the brokers really need to make sure that they do their investigations and their due diligence, not just, oh, it looks fine, because that's the stuff that's going to come back later to after the sale has closed that could cost a lot to buyers. So I think just making sure that you are getting the investigations done, making sure that you are looking closely at the reps and warranties that are being made by the seller.
And that's a good point, because you mentioned making sure that we maybe take a visual inspection and we bring into experts to understand as to what's there. And so Bob, I mean, kind of related to that, I guess certain systems that you see are typically neglected or things that kind of pop up a little bit more often than others where brokers say, that's okay, no, don't worry about it, it's all good. But in reality, to Lori's point, no, that was an issue, it was a concern. And so is there certain things that you see more often like that?
Yes. What I see the most often that's neglected is either the roof and or the heating and air conditioning system. One of the biggest reasons for that is they're out of sight. People have a tendency to just turn on the AC and it either works or it doesn't. If the roof doesn't leak, well, then fine. Unfortunately, both of those systems are the ones that wear out the fastest. Typically, they have a roughly 15 to 20 year lifespan, and they receive the least amount of maintenance and they need the most amount of maintenance.
So do you typically work with like trades men that you come in and you recommend, or you essentially kind of tell the buyer or broker that they got to find their own folks, or do you give recommendations?
I can do both. What we have on our website, and we get nothing from them, they're just people that we've dealt with and feel good about, are what we call trades referrals. And they're through all the different industries: structural, electrical, plumbing, roofing. And in each one of them, we have multiple references so that they can look at their own. Sometimes there's a particular situation, and if there is, I will end up saying, hey, here's a bunch of different people here, but this is in particular, I would recommend this particular guy because that's a bit more of his specialty.
Right. And so kind of talking about that. So Jennifer, you get, say you're in escrow, okay, the buyer's in escrow, and they've done an investigation on the property. How important is that inspection report to the lenders?
Candidly, we did not review the physical inspection report. So I've not had a scenario that I can think of where either the lender or the SBA has concerned itself with the physical inspection report. I think it's incredibly important, of course, but it's not something that the lender looks to. They rely on the appraisal and the environmental from a due diligence perspective specific to that property. And if there is significant deferred maintenance, typically that appraisal will call out that deferred maintenance. And often our lending partners and the SBA will want that deferred maintenance addressed either by way of financing whatever needs to occur or have it fixed prior to close of escrow. Each scenario is a tad bit different, but that appraisal will call out that deferred maintenance that we need to address.
And so, so talking about these inspections reports and appraisals, I mean, what if a buyer just says, you know what, I'm comfortable with the property, I really don't want to do an inspection report? And so, so maybe a question for each of you. I mean, so what happens in that case? What do you suggest to a buyer who says, you know what, don't worry about it, I'll just buy it as is?
I mean, having purchased property in the past myself, I'd say I'd do it. The only scenario where I could maybe see that not being necessary is if someone's lived in the property for, if it's like a lease that they're turning into a purchase and they've been there for the last 30, 40 years, they know that property inside and out, there could maybe be an argument made specific to that. But in my opinion, get the inspection.
Yeah. Lori, would you agree with that too?
Of course, always get the inspection. And I think too, if you're more concerned, again, it goes to the type of transaction. So if there's like a gas station on the property or some kind of previous, possible hazardous substances or something, some kind of at least environmental, report has to be done. And I believe the lenders require that anyway. But yes, definitely, because it is as is. Most of these form contracts and road as is, and there's no going back other than if there's a, representation that's been breached, and then you're out of luck later.
So talk about like sellers' representations, right? And then them providing disclosures about the property that they know or they don't know about, right? And the AIR purchase agreement, and I'm sure it's probably in the car agreement too, but I'm not as familiar with that form. But I'm sure, I know in the AIR agreement that there's typically like a 36-month survival period, right? That the property owner or the seller still has some liability and some concerns about. When does that take into effect, and just how often does that come up, and what are some things that a buyer should, I guess, kind of hang their hat on in the language that's there to help give them some additional protection?
I think especially with the AIR form, some would argue that it is a little buyer friendly because it does have all those representations. It allows for not only the regular disclosure statement, but it has their own AIR form. I think it's the seller states, like a property information sheet, which requires disclosure on several different parts of the property. It's almost the best you can do because, if obviously if you can prove that they knew about something and they didn't disclose it, then they're on the hook for those, 3 years. The problem with it, again, is that it's what's known. So it is an as is kind of transaction. So again, you're having to, as a buyer, you have that, if they do something that's explicit and they don't know, but if they don't know and you can't prove that they knew, it's only as good as, you doing your own inspection.
And you said something that comes up very often, because a lot of seller will throw their hands up and say, hey, you're buying it as is. So what does that really mean? Does a buyer really say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm not telling you anything. You got to figure it out on your own, or what does that as is language actually mean?
As is, a seller can't do that. So a seller has, even though you're saying I'm selling it as is, you're taking it on your own accord. They still have some obligations. You can't make misrepresentations. It's fraud. So they do have, if they know of something, they have to tell you.
Right. Yeah. I know I get a lot of buyers says, oh, it's as is, and it's just kind of like, oh, we got to get into a little education there, at least as much as we can, without crossing over into illegalities. And so that's very important as well. And so talking about, the environment that we're in right now, as far as the CARES Act and COVID and all these different things and programs that are out there, from the government for business to take care of. We hear a lot of the PPP, but one thing I don't hear a whole lot of, and Jennifer, maybe you could tell us a little bit more, some opportunities that are out there with the SB debt relief, right? So from what I understand, someone buys a property, I'll let you explain it, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So fortunately, SBA just made some changes to the debt relief yesterday. So I'll just kind of tell you what it is as of today. But December 27th, they passed additional stimulus. That stimulus will help borrowers from a fee perspective. So the SBA fee for the 7A loan is being waived entirely. The SBA fee for the 504 loan has been reduced by 1.5%. So on the front end, there's some fee savings. In addition, on the 504 loan, the lender participation fee of 0.5 point on the bank loan is currently being waived. So some definite opportunities on the front end to save from a fee perspective. And then there is some payment relief for borrowers that are approved between February 1st of this year and September 30 of this year. The initial release had indicated 6 months of payment relief, up to $9,000 a month. Unfortunately, as of yesterday, that's been reduced to three months of payment relief, up to $9,000 a month. So it's a great time. Again, you have kind of, historically low interest rates. you have fee waivers, and then you have payment relief up to $9,000 a month for 3 months. So great time for a business owner.
And so I would assume, and I have a question for you as far as your activity, I would assume because of that, I mean, activity would be picking up a little bit. Is that what you're seeing, or something
Busiest I've ever been.
busiest as you ever been? So how long you been
We're
doing that?
hiring people, and it's very busy. In addition to that, the stimulus included some improvements to the refinance programs. So historically, you could not refinance a government loan with another government loan. They're making some changes to that. So historically, I could only refinance debt that was maybe 2 years old. It had to be 2 years or older. They're shortening that time frame up to 6 months. So there's just a tremendous amount of activity in the marketplace, whether it be refinance opportunities or purchase opportunities.
So Jennifer, how long you been doing this?
I've been a lender for 25, almost 30 years now, but I've been with TMC for 8 years.
So this is the busiest it's ever been. Wow. It's okay. So what properties? I mean, what type of products are people mainly looking at right now? What's your pipe mainly filled with?
Light industrial, office, medical, some retail. I even have some restaurant scenarios that we're working on right now, believe it or not, finding a bank for those. Hospitality is still active. Again, finding lending participants is a little challenging in COVID, but you name it, and there's activity around it.
It's all around. Wow,
It's all around, correct.
that's great to hear. Okay, so what about appraisals? Okay, that's a topic. So we think about this, doing our due diligence, and what can a broker be doing in order to, I guess, kind of help the appraiser do his job better, and assist to make sure that appraisals in on time, so there's no delays with escrow. Do you have any suggestions for brokers on what they could do to help with the appraisal process?
I would say setting clients or buyers' expectations around ordering and engaging and paying for that appraisal at the very beginning of the process. Sometimes we'll get buyers that, well, no, I want my full loan approval. Well, unfortunately, with contingency timelines that we often having to work with, that's not a possibility. So they just need to understand that, upon opening escrow, you're writing a check, right? You're going to pay for an appraisal, whether escrow closes or not. Those run about $3,000. You're going to pay for an environmental, whether escrow closes or not. Those are about $2,000. So just being mindful that there's that out-of-pocket expense up front, and being prepared to spend that money day one. In terms of appraisal valuations, knock on wood, we're not really seeing much of a shortfall. Values are holding, purchase prices are holding. The only times where you might see a little bit of a delta is if you have like an as complete scenario where, you have someone that's purchasing it as is, they plan on doing significant improvements, and then that as complete valuation may not support all of the improvements. But I haven't even seen too many of those lately.
So cool, kind of talking about that. So, okay, so we do our due diligence, and a buyer says, hey, you know what, not only do I want to buy the property, but I got to do some electrical upgrades. I got to put in some office space. Okay. And then, $100,000, $200,000 worth of improvements, or whatever the number is. Tell us, can those improvements be financed through SBA?
Absolutely. So we can include those improvements. They'll just want to understand that they'll need to kind of get on top of getting those bids and plans. We don't necessarily need architectural plans and things along that line, but in order to include that in the project cost, we need to provide that information to the appraiser. And I always tell clients kind of garbage in, garbage out. So, if the more information you can give to that appraiser, the more likely that you'll get the value that you're looking for from an as complete perspective. And then we need all that cost documentation to support our project. So I sometimes will see delays, right? If the clients don't kind of get on top of that right away and start getting those professionals out there, to look at the project and give those bids. We can be in underwriting, but the appraisal's put on hold, and often, the underwriting at some point gets put on hold.
Okay, so a broker is preparing an offer. Okay, so has there been delays in regarding SBA approval, bank approval, appraisals? So what's your you tell a broker looking to write up a purchase agreement, how much time should it be giving for financing?
Candidly, I'm suggesting 60 days on financing, 15 to close, so 75-day escrows. Appraisers, I've noticed, have been turning a little faster, so they're catching up. They're at about 2.5 weeks right now. Now, again, that's assuming, like, say, the Certified Development Corporation engages it. So if you have a lender engaging it, it might take 3 to 3.5 weeks just because of their engagement and review process. Environmentals are taking about 3 weeks right now to engage. I'm sorry, to come back. And but just the lenders, the lenders are doing additional due diligence from an underwriting perspective, and they're busy, and the SBA is busy as well. So from the moment I hit submit to the SBA, we have to wait about 10 business days right now, 10 to 11 business days for a response.
And
So-
what are typical documents buyers need to prepare in order for you to do your job for submittal?
Oh, quite a bit. I mean, typically, ideally, you have your purchase agreement, you have your appraisal, you have your environmental, you have 3 years historical tax returns, personal business, personal financial statements, interims, or year-to-date, financials. Some lenders, as we're coming into the end of, a tax prep, I could see some of our A lenders saying, you need to file your 2020 business tax return before we can, proceed. I'm starting to see that pop up a little bit, even though the deadline's not until, March 15th, and most clients go on extension. But no, we need a complete package. We need all of the underwriting done in order to submit the loan to SBA.
Yeah, so
Not, I mean, we can do 45 days, but you have to have a buyer that is Johnny on the spot,
Johnny on the
for
spot.
lack of a better description, and a really
Jennifer on the spot.
non-lending partner. Yeah, everyone has to bring their A game right now.
Yeah, no,
We
certainly.
always do, but sometimes our buyers don't always do that. No trips to Europe,
Yeah, no, certainly. Those vacations certainly. Oh, come on. We got a timeline to deal with here. And talking about timelines and talking about when to bring people in, Bob, when's a good time to bring in you to do an inspection? What time of the process should we be calling you?
Well, personally, the earlier the better, I feel, because one of the main questions everybody has is when they're buying a commercial property is how much? How much am I going to have to invest in this? How much am I going to have to build it up? What's been deferred? And that's one of the answers that we can give them. So personally, I think the sooner the better. And we can usually turn most reports around within 24 to 48 hours. And so that helps the process stay quick.
So we talk about appraisals, we talk about financing, we talk about inspections, we talk about legalities that might be there. I know I have a certain approach. If we see stuff that's maybe not as as expected, when we first initially prepared to offer, any suggestions as far as what a broker could be doing or how they should be negotiating with the seller to make sure that those items are addressed, right? So an example, if the air conditioning is in a bad condition and no one expected that in the beginning, or plumbing is just busted underneath the ground, or the appraisal comes in short. What do you see as from other brokers or what they've done to, I guess, kind of set the transactions straight to make sure that everyone is, getting what they're paid for? You see anything creative that brokers are doing?
Oh, wow, what a great question. Probably any work that's been done within the last reasonable number of years, particularly roofing, heating and air, improvements, plans, stamped approved plans, things that we can look at and verify that have been done. That's probably the biggest thing that I can think of right off the top of my head.
Right.
I think too, if the contingency period hasn't run yet, and you're deciding whether or not you're going to go through with the purchase of the property, if there's a big issue, you can always bring that to the attention of the other broker. Maybe you get a reduction in the purchase price. Maybe you get some kind of other incentive to continue.
Right. Jennifer, a lot of brokers. Anything creative you see what they do?
Oh, nothing in terms of just property issues. I mean, some of it's all been said, I would say.
Yeah, let's go back to them and just address it and bring it up.
Address it, and yeah. And again, we can sometimes finance some of those issues. I mean, there's always a way if we've got willing parties. Right.
And so I know you mentioned earlier about a 50% coverage. And so does does a buyer need to, when they purchase the property, the day of closing of escrow, do they need to occupy that 51% or greater from the time they close escrow? Is there a certain time frame that they have to occupy that space?
They need to occupy the space within 12 months is the general rule of thumb. So if you have an existing lease in place, that's not a problem. If you have a seller lease back, that's not a problem. We would just want to make sure that they can occupy that property within 12 months.
12 months. And if they
after closing
don't,
escrow.
and if they're not able to, then they're not eligible for SBA financing, or?
Yeah, but usually not, unless we're going to have a tenant that's willing to break a lease, but yeah, typically, and I can maybe stretch that to 14 months just because of kind of the whole funding aspect of our loan program. But yes, and so in those scenarios, sometimes we'll look at, some sort of bridge financing. I'm working on one of those right now. So there are some creative, ways in which we get, we can bridge the gap, get ourselves to the occupancy. If they have the available down payment to come in with maybe 40 or 50%, put a bridge loan in place, and then take that bridge loan out with, permanent SBA financing once we're at that occupancy percentage. So there's some ways potentially, again, with willing parties.
Yeah, it's always good to know. All right, Lori, here's a question that I think a lot of brokers get asked or get popped with from time to time, right? Where we want to represent a buyer in a transaction, or we want to represent a seller in a transaction, right? And that prospect that we're trying to work with as our client, who we're trying to represent, says, you know what, Gary, it's okay, thank you, but no, thank you. I have my lawyer that's going to represent me on this transaction. Okay. I guess what are the benefits, or what are some of the things that we should be telling that prospect or that prospect, that potential client, to let them know what the differences are between a commercial real estate broker and what the attorney is going to do or not do?
That's a great question, because I've actually just had that happen to me. I always think a broker is a really good idea to have. I mean, I think they, go through the checklist of the due diligence issues. Their seasoned agents will know, the knowledge of the marketplace, where I think the lawyer's role is more the extra eyes for the specific issues. If there's contract negotiations, and if you have to look at specific documents like title documents, there's an easement dispute, or the buyer or the other side has a lawyer already and has come up with their own non-typical purchase agreement. I think a lawyer is good at those, assisting in those, and those are things that brokers won't know. But I always encourage to at least have a broker and then add on the lawyer, not just the lawyer. And two, I think lots of times people are concerned that lawyers, and sometimes it happens, are going to over lawyer a deal. So, too much nitpicking here or there. But I think it is beneficial to, if it's a big property, it's expensive, it's a big investment, to use your broker, but then have a lawyer just glance over it. Make sure there's no glaring issues that are sticking out. But yeah, I always recommend that you should have a broker.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, 100%. All the time on that. So, okay, so some attorneys just don't like the AIR agreement or car purchase form. Not sure your stance on that, whether you like it or not. But how do you typically work with it? Do you normally just say, hey, use it as is, or are there certain things that they should be looking at, or maybe making some suggestions or modifications, or talking to you about something?
I think for a simple transaction, it's generally fine. If it's pretty, I think for the most part, it does evenly protect both. Some will argue that it is more buyer friendly because, all the disclosures, and there's certain provisions that I know when I do custom agreements for sellers, you want that added general release, or maybe you want to limit the disclosure section of, reps and warranties past the 36 months. Or some kind of limit of liability. But like I said, for simple transactions, I think it's fine. I think you just kind of need to go in and review if, the standard form has 10 to 30 days for contingencies. So, you might want to go and make it 60 days. But again, a broker that's experienced will probably already do that. And you might want to, like the AIR form, if you are representing a buyer, it has those passive removal of contingencies instead of where they have to actively say, I'm waiving or these contingencies, things like that, I think can be changed. But again, I think it's something that a broker can do. If it is a complicated transaction, a big property, again, hazardous substances, something like that, I tend to try to use a more custom. And then I also experience if it's a property that's, an REO property that's, been taken through foreclosure through a bank. As representing a bank, I know we always use a custom form just because there's a lot of more as is, they're not making any representations or warranties because they never really own the property. So I think it just depends on the situation.
So one thing you said is AIR form on the due diligence, there are contingencies, so silence is considered acceptance, right? And so let's just say, day comes and, no one mentions anything or says anything. What happens at that point if the buyer, truly wants it back out, but, they were silenced and didn't say anything about the contingency in that timely manner?
Well, I think that's where you kind of get into looking at the terms of the contract. Escrow is not going to release it, until they get the instructions, but the seller would have the right to, try to sue for the liquidated damage clause, for because under it, they're entitled to, if they don't go forward and they don't proceed with the transaction, they can always get keep the deposit. So, I mean, you could ask for that. Obviously, they're probably not going to hand it over to you. So, the AIR form makes you go to arbitration to get it back.
Yeah. And so Bob, I mean, this whole time, where people are very mindful about entering the properties and not entering properties and making sure that everything is sanitized. Has that created a change or any challenges for you in your business? Or you do anything different these days, to make sure that everyone is, feeling comfortable and happy?
We've had some dramatic changes in that regard, particularly apartment buildings. For a couple of months, we pretty much couldn't go in to anything for one reason or another. A lot of people just didn't want us to. We've had some healthcare facilities that we had to do the interior inspection via FaceTime with a maintenance personnel walking around and us directing them to look at this and look at that in detail while we looked at the exteriors. We're always wearing masks. Gloves depends on the situation, but we almost always wear gloves whenever we're inside of any building anymore. There's places that we've had to do where we've basically had hazmat suits on, masks, face shields, booties, gloves, and it's been challenging, to say the least. It's been challenging. However, over the last 4 or 5 months, we've been as busy as we have ever been. In fact, actually, we've been busier. January was the second busiest month that we've had since 2006.
So we're seeing some commonality between you and Jennifer. You're saying the busiest you've ever been. How about you, Lori? Are you also the busiest you've ever been, or what are you saying?
I wouldn't say the busiest I've ever been, but I feel like I'm actually surprised at how much I am getting on sales of commercial property just in the last month.
Wow. Good. Okay. Well, boots on the ground. We're hearing it, straight from the people that are working with everyone. Okay, I'm going to go through the questions here, just make sure we get all the questions answered. And so Mike Gormley, this is for Bob Pace, it says, is there a state licensing requirement for inspectors for commercial buildings?
Interestingly enough, no. However, all of my guys are certified inspectors. There's different organizations, ASHI, CREA, California Real Estate Inspection Association. So everybody that works with me is organizationally certified to do inspections. Yeah, that's the answer to the question.
Great. Well, wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to go to John Baker right here. I think he has more of a statement than a question. He's just saying a seller and his or her agent have a duty to disclose all material facts that the seller knows about to the buyer, regardless of an as-is language. However, the seller has no duty to investigate. The seller only has to disclose what he or she knows. So just some additional context there. Thank you for that, John. Carl has a question on SBA. I think we maybe answered this already, but if you could if there's anything to add on to Jennifer. On SBA, they did require 50% of floor area occupied by the company, taking out the loan, then 50% lease space. Were the regs revised to allow more lease space in the subject building?
No, 51% is the requirement. There's some rare scenarios where we can use yard, for example, as usable square footage. So I can't use common area as usable square footage. That will have to be divided. But I have seen scenarios where we're coming up a little short, but if it makes sense that that yard is kind of an extension of the business, then we can look to using that. But general rule of thumb, 51%.
Great, thank you for that. And just for our participants, we are getting, we have a few minutes here left here. So if you have any questions, go ahead and get them in. We'll make sure we answer them. And Justin Hugren has a question for you, Bob. How does a broker work with a property inspector to get a report that addresses concerns and costs to address concerns of the report in a timely manner? Right. Some inspectors will list several items that need a trade to look into further. The inspection did not help much since we need to consult with trades that cost time and money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is probably an inherent difficulty in our business, to be honest with you. And it's one of the reasons why we recommend you get as qualified an inspector out there initially. There's kind of a general rule of thumb that I have decided not to operate from, and that's that if you see something, note it and then defer it. We have, as much as reasonably possible, we try not to do that. If we, classic examples, we'll go back to roofing and heating and air. If we see problems up there and I see old heating and air, I'm going to give you prices for what it's going to take to replace those within industry standards. Typically, we try to give prices for things that you're going to have to spend money on over the next 5 years. However, if you have particularly technical things, let's say you want to do an industrial and you want to do manufacturing and you have very little electrical coming in, I can't give you a qualified answer of how much is the electrical going to cost that you're going to need. You're going to need a specialist. So it really just depends on the situation and the knowledge of the inspector.
Wonderful. Well, Bob, Jennifer, Lori, thank you so much for your time. We wanted to make sure we brought up Eric, our fabulous president of SoCal CCIM. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today, and for everything that you do. You have anything that you'd like to say or chime in on, Eric?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank our participants. I've worked with Jennifer and Bob in the past, and they do a great job. I'm looking forward to the opportunity of working with Lori at some time, and we just really appreciate what you guys do and for joining us today.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for your time. Anyone have any closing remarks before we end here?
Just want to say thank you for the time.
Thank you.
I have a little quote here that I'll share with everyone. It's actually my favorite quote that's actually changed my concept of how I do business. And the quote is, with all things being equal, people want to do business with the people they know, like, and trust. And when things are not quite so equal, people still want to do business with the people they know, like, and trust. So what does that mean? We don't have to be the most professional. We don't have to be the best looking. We don't have to, have all the answers. But if people know us, like us, and trust us, we have an opportunity. And then that's what we try to do here at SoCal CCIM. We always want to encourage people to meet the people, to know them, like them, trust them, and help grow each other's business. And so with that, thank you everyone so much for your time. It was fantastic seeing everyone. Eric, thank you for everything you do. And we'll see everyone next month.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Greatly appreciated. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.